Grisly crimes from the past. Death of a Playboy prince. The public in the 1920s was fascinated by the mysterious East. It was a decade when Valentino was the Sheik and Fairbanks was the Thief of Baghdad, when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, and when, throughout the Western world, corp-haired jazz girls daubed their eyelids with Egyptian coal, and in 1923, there occurred a sensational murder trial to match the taste of the period. In a sumptuous suite at a Savoy Hotel, Madame Marie-Marguerite Fahmy shot dead her Egyptian playboy husband, Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey. He had treated her, it seemed, like an Oriental beast. To the case's exotic mixture of sex, luxury and blood were added the talents of Sir Edward Marshall Hall, the most flamboyant defense counsel of the age. Small wonder that the Savoy Shooting stole the front page headlines. Madame Fahmy, the accused, was a glamorous Parisian brunette aged 32 at the time of the trial. The prince, 10 years younger, was a wealthy Egyptian and attaché at the French legation in Cairo. The couple had met in Paris during May of 1922, at which time she was a divorcee, and she progressed quickly from becoming the prince's mistress to becoming his wife. The pair were married in December of that year. Madame Fahmy accepted the Muslim faith for the purpose of the wedding, but insisted on her right to wear Western clothes. She also stipulated that she retained the right of divorce, but this was not acknowledged by her husband. Prince Fahmy considered his wife bound to him under Muslim law. She possessed the sole right of divorce, as well as the right to take 3 more wives should he wish to do so. The marriage was disastrous. Whatever infatuation was present at the outset, the couple quarreled whenever they lived as man and wife, in Paris, Cairo and in London, to which they came in July of 1923. Often Prince Fahmy beat his wife, once so severely that her jaw was dislocated. On another occasion, he kept her locked up for 3 days on his yacht. On yet another, he swore an oath on the Quran that one day he would kill her. This was done with such solemnity that the frightened woman wrote formally to her lawyer, accusing her husband if she would ever disappear. Yesterday, January 21, 1923, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he took his Bible or Quran, I do not know how it is called, kissed it, put his hand on it, and swore to avenge himself upon me tomorrow, in 8 days, a month, 3 months, but I must disappear in his hands. This oath was taken without any reason, neither jealousy nor a sin on my part. As for the prince, he really does seem to have regarded his wife as a creature to be mastered by force. Just now I am engaged in training her, he once wrote. With women, one must be severe, no bad habits. They had been at the Savoy for barely a week when the fatal row broke out. On the evening of 9th of July, the couple quarreled violently in the hotel restaurant, and Madame Fahmy, it was to be said at the trial, shouted in French, "You shut up, I will smash this bottle over your head." Asked by the band leader if she wanted anything special played, she answered, "I don't want any music. My husband has threatened to kill me tonight." Upstairs at about 1:30 a.m., the quarrel was still going on. A porter saw Prince Fahmy burst from his room in his pajamas, a flushed mark on his cheek. "Look at my face," he fumed. "Look at what she has done." Then Madame Fahmy came out too, still in her white, beaded evening dress, and shouted furiously in French. The porter ushered them back into their suite and walked on down the corridor. Moments later, 3 shots detonated. Rushing back to the suite, the porter saw Madame Fahmy toss down a .32 Browning automatic. The prince lay bleeding from head wounds and died not long after in hospital. Charged with murder, Madame Fahmy was brought to trial at the Old Baileys in September 1923. Her cause inevitably stirred up a lot of public sympathy, but sympathy alone does not win court cases. Madame Fahmy had manifestly shot her husband dead at point-blank range in the heat of a domestic quarrel, and it would need all the talents of a defense counsel, Marshall Hall, to get her off the hook. He gave the case everything he had got. Handsome and flamboyant in style, the advocate was famed for theatrical effects that have disappeared from the modern lawyer's repertoire, but they still sold juries in 1920s, and Marshall Hall was their leading exponent. Of course, he dwelled on Prince Fahmy's cruelty, cataloguing the beating and humiliation endured by his wife, but there was more to be said against the dead man. Marshall Hall suggested that he was a homosexual who enjoyed a compromising relationship with his male secretary. Madame Fahmy, it was alleged, had been made to submit to a nameless but nauseating sexual indignity, presumably anal intercourse, and stuffed painful illness in consequence. In fact, that illness was what provoked the quarrel on the fateful night. She had asked for money to pay for an operation in Paris, and he told her that she could only have it if she agreed to indulge his whim. "I will if you do something for me," he had said, before starting to tear off her dress. When Madame Fahmy refused, he half strangled her. "He seized me suddenly and brutally by the throat with his left hand," she testified in French. All her statements were made in her native tongue and delivered to the court through an interpreter. "His thumb was on my windpipe and his fingers were pressing on my neck. I pushed him away, but he crouched to spring on me and said, 'I will kill you.' I lifted my arm in front of me and without looking, pulled the trigger. The next moment, I saw him on the ground before me. I do not know how many times the revolver went off." She had thought that the gun was empty of cartridges. "I thought the sight of the pistol might frighten him," she sobbed under cross-examination. Marshall Hall's final speech to the jury was regarded as the most dramatic of his brilliant career. Having cast the prince as an Oriental monster of depravity, he impersonated him, talking across the court in emulation of his advance on his wife. Then, pistol in hand, the advocate took the part of his client. As he crouched for the last time, crouched like an animal, retired for the last time to get a bound forward. She turned the pistol and put it to his face. Suddenly, Marshall Hall leveled the gun at the foreman of the jury. He paused for a moment, and to her horror, the thing went off. All eyes were fixed on the tableau. The court was in total silence, and then Marshal Hunt released the gun, which clattered to the floor exactly as Madame Fahmy had dropped it. It was a spellbinding moment, and the advocate had further touches on courtroom magic in store. Concluding his address, he referred to the Oriental darkness into which the prisoner had been plunged by her marriage. "I will ask you to open the gate and let this Western woman go back into the light of God's great Western sun," he ended, extending a prophetic arm high up on the Old Bailey's skylight. A shaft of sun came through right on cue. In no time at all, the jury had found Madame Fahmy not guilty of murder, not guilty of manslaughter either. Such volcanic cheers erupted with the verdict that the judge ordered the public benches to be cleared, and it was in an emptied court that Madame Fahmy sobbed her gratitude as she was released from custody, a free woman. The whole case had become a triumph for Western light over Oriental darkness in an almost offensive manner. In fact, Marshall Hall received a formal complaint from the leader of the Egyptian bar, accusing him of castigating all Egypt and indeed the entire East in order to save his client. The truth is that the fictional idea of the Sheik had made a horribly flawed counterpart in Prince Fahmy. Marshall Hall had merely toyed with the conventions of his day, reversing the romantic image to make the dead playboy an archetype of evil. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and leave a comment, as it helps with YouTube algorithm to grow this channel. You'll find similar contents in my other videos. Have a safe day. Signing off.